You feel it in your chest, that gnawing ache when someone leaves you hanging, when conversations end mid-sentence, when they walk away without explanation. Your mind races, constructing elaborate scenarios, desperate to fill the void they've left behind. You tell yourself it's normal, that you simply care too much, but the truth cuts deeper. You are addicted to closure, and this addiction has made you powerless. It starts small. A text left unread, a call unreturned, a conversation that dissolves into silence without warning. Your first instinct is to reach out again, to bridge the gap they've created, to force completion where none was offered. You convince yourself you're being reasonable, that you simply need to understand, that clarity is your right. But each attempt reveals more than you realize, not their intentions, but your desperation. The need for resolution becomes a hunger that devours your peace. You replay their last words, searching for hidden meanings, for clues to their departure. You craft messages you never send, rehearse conversations that will never happen. Imagine reconciliations that exist only in your mind. You are not seeking truth. You are feeding an addiction that grows stronger with each unfulfilled attempt at understanding. This craving for completion transforms you into something you never intended to become, a beggar at the table of others' attention. You lower yourself, compromise your dignity, sacrifice your self-respect, all for the illusion that their explanation will somehow set you free. But freedom never comes from their lips. It never could. The very act of seeking it from them ensures its absence. You begin to notice the pattern. The more you chase, the more they retreat. The more you explain, the less they understand. The more you give, the less they value. You are trapped in a dance where your movement creates their distance, where your need generates their power. And still, you continue, convinced that the next attempt will finally bring the closure you crave. But pause for a moment. Consider what you're really seeking when you chase their explanations. Is it truly understanding, or is it something darker, the need to control their narrative about you, to force them to acknowledge your worth, to make them accountable for the pain their absence has caused? Your pursuit of closure is not love. It is the desperate attempt to maintain influence over someone who has already withdrawn their attention from your life. You've been conditioned to believe that every story needs an ending. Every conflict requires resolution. Every relationship demands its final word. But this is the lie that keeps you chained. The belief that closure comes from others, that your peace depends on their explanations, their apologies, their acknowledgement. You sit in this prison of incompleteness, waiting for keys that will never come, while those who understand power have already walked away. Society has taught you to value resolution above all else. Movies end with conversations that tie up loose ends. Books conclude with revelations that make everything clear. Therapy promises that understanding your past will heal your present. But life is not a story crafted for your comfort. People are not characters obligated to provide you with satisfying conclusions. The world owes you no explanations, and your demand for them reveals not your depth, but your delusion. Consider the relationships that ended without ceremony, the friendships that faded without discussion, the connections that simply disappeared. You mourned not just their absence, but the lack of formal goodbye, the missing conversation that would have made sense of it all. You created meaning where none existed, invented reasons where none were given, built elaborate theories to explain simple departures. In doing so, you kept these people alive in your mind long after they had moved on from yours. The need for closure becomes a form of psychological bondage. You remain tethered to people who have forgotten your name, bound to conversations that ended years ago, imprisoned by questions that were never meant to be answered. While you waste your energy seeking completion, they live free from the weight of your expectations. They have already found their peace in the very incompleteness that tortures you. This is where the weak reveal themselves, in their inability to exist without explanation, to find peace without permission, to move forward without approval. They create elaborate rituals around endings, demand ceremonies for departures, insist on understanding what was never meant to be understood. They mistake their need for control for a desire for healing, their addiction to drama for a commitment to growth. But what if the explanation you seek would not bring the peace you imagine? What if their truth would only create new questions, new pain, new reasons to remain attached to what should be released? The closure you crave might be the very thing that keeps you from moving forward, the final chain that binds you to a past that has already forgotten you. Those who understand power know that explanation is not owed, that closure is not required, that your peace is not their responsibility. They exit without ceremony because they recognize that elaborate goodbyes serve only to maintain connections that have already served their purpose. They understand that clean breaks are kinder than prolonged deaths, that silence is more honest than false comfort. Machiavelli understood what you're only beginning to glimpse, that the need for closure is not love, it's control disguised as vulnerability. When you chase endings, you reveal your desperation, your weakness, your inability to exist in uncertainty. The powerful know this. They watch you scramble for conclusions while they remain deliberately incomplete, forever beyond your grasp, forever holding the strings of your attention. The prince taught us that power lies not in what you give, but in what you withhold. Not in what you explain, but in what you leave mysterious. Not in how completely you reveal yourself, but in how skillfully you remain unknown. Every demand for closure you make, every explanation you seek, every conversation you try to force, these are not acts of strength, but admissions of powerlessness. Consider how the powerful move through the world. They do not explain their departures or justify their choices to those who no longer serve their interests. They do not provide closure to relationships that have run their course. They understand that their time, their energy, their attention are finite resources not to be wasted on the emotional management of others. They exit cleanly, completely, without the burden of your need for understanding. You have mistaken their silence for cruelty, their departure for abandonment, their refusal to explain for indifference. But their behavior is not about you at all, it is about them, their priorities, their boundaries, their understanding that they are not responsible for your peace. They have learned what you have not, that owing explanations to everyone who demands them is a form of slavery disguised as courtesy. The truly powerful do not chase closure because they do not need it. They find completion within themselves, peace in their own decisions, resolution in their own understanding. They do not require others to validate their choices or explain their departures because their self-worth is not dependent and external confirmation. They are complete unto themselves, whole without others' participation, free from the need to be understood. This is the recognition that changes everything. Those who demand your explanations are revealing their weakness, and those who refuse to provide them are demonstrating their strength. The balance of power in any relationship can be measured by who needs closure more, who seeks understanding more desperately, who cannot accept incompleteness with grace. When you chase their explanations, you hand them your power. When you demand their closure, you advertise your dependence. When you cannot accept their silence, you reveal your inability to exist without their participation. You become predictable, manageable, controllable, everything the powerful recognize as weakness. Consider the moments when you felt most powerless, when they stopped responding, when they left without goodbye, when they offered no explanation for their departure. In those moments, you weren't experiencing loss, you were experiencing the withdrawal of control. Your mind, trained to seek patterns and conclusions, began consuming itself, creating stories where none existed, filling silences with your own anxious projections. The absence of explanation created a vacuum that your mind rushed to fill. You invented reasons for their behavior, imagined slights that might have caused their departure, constructed elaborate theories about their motivations. But these stories were not insight, they were self-torture disguised as understanding. You were not solving mysteries. You were creating them, feeding the very addiction that kept you powerless. Your brain, desperate for closure, began to manufacture meaning from meaninglessness. A delayed response became evidence of anger. Silence became proof of indifference. Their absence became confirmation of your worst fears about yourself. You read significance into insignificance, interpreted meaning where none existed, created drama where there was only simplicity. This is how incompleteness becomes a weapon. Against you. Not because others wield it intentionally, but because you cannot bear its existence. Your need for resolution transforms their simple departure into your complex obsession. Their ability to move on becomes your inability to let go. Their peace with uncertainty becomes your war with reality. The torture of incompleteness is self-inflicted. They are not holding you captive with their silence, you are imprisoning yourself with your need for their voice. They are not tormenting you with their absence, you are punishing yourself with your inability to accept their departure. The cage exists only in your mind, and only you hold the key to your release.in. These moments of perceived powerlessness, you reveal the extent of your dependence on others for your own emotional stability. You show that your peace is conditional on their participation, your happiness contingent on their approval, your understanding dependent on their explanation. You demonstrate that you are not psychologically sovereign, but emotionally enslaved. Those who wield true influence understand the weapon of unfinished business. They speak in ellipses, leave conversations suspended, create questions they never answer. While you exhaust yourself seeking completion, they move through the world unburdened by your need for neat endings. Their silence becomes your obsession, their absence your constant companion, their mystery your cage. They have learned what you have not, that the most powerful position is the one that cannot be fully understood, completely predicted, or entirely possessed. They remain partially hidden, incompletely revealed, forever beyond your full comprehension. This is not game playing, this is self-preservation disguised as strategy. Watch how they operate. They do not explain their movements, justify their choices, or provide detailed accounts of their motivations. They understand that explanation diminishes mystery, that too much revelation reduces their power, that complete transparency makes them completely predictable. They give you enough to maintain your interest but never enough to satisfy your curiosity. They're strategic. Incompleteness serves multiple purposes. It conserves their energy for more important matters. It maintains their psychological sovereignty. It prevents others from using their words against them. It keeps their options open for future decisions. Most importantly, it forces others to reveal their own desperation through the intensity of their pursuit. You mistake their restraint for coldness, their boundaries for cruelty, their self-protection for indifference. But they are not being mean, they are being wise. They understand that giving you everything you want would only make you want more, that satisfying your curiosity would only create new questions, that providing closure would only open new demands for explanation. They have learned to become comfortable with being misunderstood because they know that the alternative, constantly explaining themselves to those who demand it, is a form of psychological suicide. They would rather be accused of coldness than guilty of weakness, rather be seen as mysterious than known as desperate. You must kill the part of yourself that believes others owe you explanations, that relationships require ceremonial endings, that your peace depends on their participation. This death is not comfortable. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of unfinished stories, to find wholeness in incompleteness, to discover that your need for closure was never about them at all. This killing is perhaps the most difficult transformation you will ever undergo. It requires you to challenge every belief you have held about relationships, communication, and human connection. You must abandon the fairy tale that everyone who enters your life owes you a proper goodbye, that every person who touches your heart must provide an explanation for their departure. The part of you that seeks closure is the same part that seeks control. It is the aspect of your psyche that cannot bear uncertainty, that demands explanations for every mystery, that insists on understanding what was never meant to be understood. This part must die for you to be free, but its death will feel like losing a fundamental piece of yourself. You will grieve this loss. You will miss the comfort of believing that closure is possible, that understanding is guaranteed, that every relationship comes with the promise of resolution. You will feel naked without the armor of your expectations, vulnerable without the shield of your demands. But this vulnerability is not weakness, it is the beginning of true strength. That as this part of you dies, you will discover what has always been true. Your peace was never dependent on their words, your understanding never contingent on their explanation, your healing never conditional on their participation. You were always complete without their completion of your story. You always had everything you needed for your own peace. The death of your need for closure will reveal the birth of your psychological sovereignty. You will no longer be at the mercy of others' willingness to explain themselves. You will no longer be held hostage by their silence or controlled by their absence. You will discover that you can create your own endings, write your own conclusions, find your own peace. This transformation requires you to become comfortable with questions that have no answers, stories that have no endings, relationships that simply fade without ceremony. You must learn to find beauty in incompleteness, strength in uncertainty, peace in the unknown. This is not resignation, it is liberation disguised as acceptance. Your brain, desperate for resolution, creates elaborate narratives to fill the gaps they've left behind. You analyze their last words, dissect their final gestures, search for hidden meanings in their silence. But this is not insight, this is self-torture disguised as understanding. You are not solving mysteries. You are creating them, feeding the very addiction that keeps you powerless. The human mind cannot tolerate vacuum. When others leave spaces unfilled, your psyche rushes to complete the picture, to make sense of the senseless, to create order from chaos. But the stories you create are not truth. They are fiction designed to ease your discomfort with uncertainty. You become a novelist of your own pain, an author of your own suffering. You construct elaborate psychologies for their behavior. You imagine complex motivations for their silence. You invent detailed reasons for their departure. But these creations are not born from insight. They are born from inability to accept that some things simply are what they appear to be. Endings without explanation, departures without ceremony, silence without hidden meaning. Your analysis becomes obsession. You replay conversations searching for clues you missed the first time. You examine their words for double meanings that were never there. You interpret their actions through the lens of your own need for significance. You transform their simple choices into complex puzzles that exist only in your desperate mind. This mental churning serves no purpose except to keep you attached to what should be released. Every theory you construct about their behavior is another chain binding you to their memory. Every explanation you invent for their silence is another reason to remain connected to their absence. You are not processing their departure, you are preventing it. The mind that seeks patterns will find them even where they don't exist. The psyche that demands meaning will create it even from meaninglessness. You are not uncovering their truth, you are manufacturing your own delusion, crafting comfortable lies to avoid uncomfortable reality. The mystery you're trying to solve is not their behavior. It's your inability to accept it without understanding that this endless analysis reveals not your intelligence, but your imprisonment. You have become a prisoner of your own need to know, a slave to your addiction to understanding. While you exhaust yourself decoding messages that were never encrypted, they move forward unburdened by your interpretations of their actions. The tragedy is that even if your theories were correct, even if your analysis was accurate, even if Your understanding was complete. None of it would change the fundamental reality. They are gone, and you remain. All your mental energy invested in understanding their departure could have been used to facilitate your own arrival at a new place of peace. What if you stopped chasing? What if you became the one who left conversations unfinished, who offered no explanations, who disappeared without the courtesy of goodbye? This reversal is not cruelty. It is the reclamation of your own attention, the withdrawal of your energy from those who would exploit your need for completeness. Imagine the power in this transformation. Instead of being the one who reaches out, you become the one who withdraws. Instead of seeking explanations, you become the one who offers none. Instead of chasing closure, you become the one who leaves others in the uncertainty you once experienced. This is not revenge, it is revolution. The reversal begins with a simple recognition. Your attention is valuable, your energy is finite, your time is precious. You have been giving these resources freely to those who do not appreciate their worth. You have been investing your emotional capital in people who offer no return. You have been spending your psychological currency on relationships that have already declared bankruptcy. When you stop chasing, something remarkable happens. The dynamic shifts, the power redistributes. Those who once held your attention hostage suddenly find themselves seeking what they once took for granted. Your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. Your silence speaks louder than your words ever could. This reversal requires discipline. You must resist the urge to explain your new behavior, to justify your withdrawal, to provide the very closure you once sought from others. You must become comfortable with being misunderstood, with being labeled cold or cruel, with being accused of the very behavior that once hurt you. This discomfort is temporary, but the power you gain is permanent. You begin to understand that explanation is a form of weakness. Every justification you offer is evidence of your need for approval. Every reason you provide is proof of your dependence on their understanding. The powerful do not explain themselves to those who have lost the privilege of their attention. They simply withdraw completely and without ceremony. Your silence becomes your strength. Your absence becomes your presence. Your withdrawal becomes your advance. You discover that the less you give, the more valuable you become. The less you explain, the more mysterious you appear. The less you chase, the more you are pursued. This transformation is not about becoming cruel or indifferent. It is about becoming selective with your energy, protective of your peace, sovereign in your relationships. You learn to reserve your explanations for those who have earned them, your presence for those who value it, your attention for those who reciprocate it. You begin to understand that your presence is more powerful when it's unpredictable, your words more impactful when they're unfinished, your relationships more valuable when they're undefined. You learn to leave people wanting more, not because you're playing games, but because you've discovered that your completeness doesn't depend on their understanding. The art of strategic incompleteness is not manipulation, it is self-preservation. Elevated to mastery, you no longer offer your full self to those who cannot appreciate your complexity. You no longer explain your depths to those who can only understand your surface. You no longer complete yourself for those who would only seek to diminish your wholeness. You become selective with your revelations. You share your truth only with those who have proven worthy of it. You offer your explanations only to those who have earned the right to understand. You provide closure only to relationships that deserve ceremonial endings. Everything else simply fades without fanfare, ends without explanation, concludes without ceremony. Your conversations become more powerful because you no longer feel compelled to finish every thought. Your relationships become more valuable because you no longer make yourself completely available. Your presence becomes more impactful because it cannot be taken for granted. You have learned the power of the period left untyped, the sentence left incomplete, the story left untold, This strategic incompleteness extends to every aspect of your interactions. You no longer feel obligated to respond to every message, to return every call, to provide updates on your life to those who have not earned them. You understand that constant availability is not kindness. It is the destruction of your own value. Through oversupply, you begin to appreciate the beauty of unfinished business. The conversations that end mid-thought. The relationships that fade without formal goodbye. The connections that simply run their course without elaborate postmortems. You discover that incompleteness can be more honest than forced conclusions. That silence can be more truthful than manufactured explanations. People begin to notice the change in you. They sense something different in your energy, something powerful in your restraint, something magnetic in your mystery. They find themselves thinking about you more because they understand you less. They want your attention more because you give it less freely. They value your words more because you speak them more carefully. You realize that you have always had this power. You simply gave it away through over-explanation, over-availability, over-investment in others' understanding. Now you reclaim it through strategic withdrawal, selective engagement, and sovereign self-possession. You become the author of your own mystery rather than the solver of others' riddles. In your new understanding, you realize that closure was always an illusion, a comforting lie that kept you dependent on others for your own peace. You no longer need their explanations because you've stopped asking the questions. You no longer seek their approval because you've withdrawn from their judgment. You exist in the space between endings, comfortable with mystery, at peace with incompleteness. This realization is perhaps the most liberating discovery of your transformation. Closure, you now understand, was never something others could give you. It was always something you could only give yourself. Every moment you spent waiting for their words to heal you was a moment you could have been healing yourself. Every explanation you sought from them was an explanation you already possessed within. You begin to see closure for what it truly was, a sophisticated form of external dependency disguised as emotional healing. You were outsourcing your peace to people who had their own agendas, their own limitations, their own reasons for withholding what you sought. You were making your emotional freedom contingent on their willingness to participate in your healing process. The questions you once needed them to answer, you now answer for yourself. The understanding you once sought from their lips, you now find in your own reflection. The peace you once believed required their participation, you now create through your own sovereignty. You discover that you were always enough, always complete, always whole, even in the midst of incompleteness. This space between endings becomes your natural habitat. You learn to thrive in uncertainty, to find strength in ambiguity, to discover beauty in questions without answers. You no longer need every story to have a conclusion because you understand that life itself is an unfinished story, a continuous becoming rather than a series of completed chapters. You realize that the relationships that ended without ceremony were teaching you something valuable, that connection does not require ceremony, that love does not demand explanation, that significance is not dependent on formal acknowledgement. Some of the most meaningful encounters in your life happened without fanfare and ended without explanation, yet their impact remains undimmed by the absence of closure. Your peace is no longer conditional on others' willingness to explain themselves. Your understanding is no longer dependent on their cooperation. Your healing is no longer subject to their participation. You have become psychologically sovereign, emotionally independent, spiritually complete. You exist as a whole person, regardless of others' incomplete participation in your life. This sovereignty extends to your relationships with those who once held power over you through their withholding. You no longer see their silence as rejection, but as information about their capacity for communication. You no longer interpret their departure as abandonment, but as evidence of their limitations. You no longer experience their withdrawal as loss, but as liberation from the exhausting pursuit of their explanation. You watch others chase you now, desperate for the closure you once sought from them, but you offer none. Not from cruelty, but from wisdom. You understand that giving them what they seek would only perpetuate their weakness, just as seeking it from others perpetuated yours. You have become the unfinished story, the unanswered question, the mystery that others cannot solve. This final transformation completes your evolution from powerlessness to sovereignty. You who once begged for explanations now withhold them. You who once chased closure now create incompleteness. You who once needed understanding now embrace mystery. The reversal is complete, and in its completion, you find the very peace that closure could never provide. You recognize the desperation. In their attempts to decode your silence, to understand your withdrawal, to force explanations from your restraint, you see your former self in their pursuit, your old weakness in their need, your past powerlessness in their current desperation. But you offer no relief because you understand that relief must come from within, just as yours did, your refusal. To provide closure is not cruelty, it is compassion disguised as strength. You know that giving them what they seek would rob them of the opportunity to develop the very sovereignty you have discovered. Your silence forces them to find their own peace, just as others' silence once forced you to find yours. You have become the teacher you once needed, offering lessons through withdrawal rather than explanation. In this final position, you understand the complete cycle. You have moved from weakness to strength, from dependency to sovereignty, from the desperate pursuit of closure to the powerful creation of incompleteness. You are no longer the story others refuse to finish. You are the author who chooses when to end chapters, when to leave questions unanswered, when to walk away without explanation. You exist now in perfect psychological balance, complete in your incompleteness, whole in your partiality, finished in your unfinished business. You have learned the deepest truth of human connection, that the most powerful relationships are those that do not require understanding to be meaningful, explanation to be significant, or closure to be complete. You are sovereign, mysterious, and finally, magnificently free.